Well, hello. While you are reading through your textbook and learning about hardware and software, cloud computing, especially information security, this little video is to help you understand how you can secure yourself online. Router is one of your first lines of defense against any unwanted intervention over the internet. You don't want anyone else to look at what you're doing online and eventually steal your information. So this topic is for you to learn about how to make use of the tool available in your routers to safeguard your information online. It's a small video, just watch it and make notes and learn how to use tools in this router to secure yourself or your home network while you are using internet. Now when you buy a router, it comes with set of usernames and passwords. This router that I'm using is a Netgear router. It says right here. And the sets of username and passwords I talked about are of two types. One set of username and password is to access the admin control. And the dashboard you're looking at right now is the admin control, where I can set up my router to be as secure as I want it to be. The other set of username and password is called the Wi-Fi username and password, which is displayed right here where my cursor is. The name of my wireless network, also called as SSID, is Netgear94. And here is my password. It's a default password. I didn't change it because I don't use this router to access internet. The third bit that you're seeing on my dashboard is number of devices attached. Right now there is only one device attached to this router, which is this laptop I'm using to record this video. If there are more than one device attached to this network, you will see the number right here, and if you click on it, you will see all the information, and we're going to access that in just a moment. So let's get started in setting up this router. Now, because routers are typically accessed through our Wi-Fi network or wireless network, we are going to go into wireless. And wireless is the place where we are going to be setting up first set of defense, which is setting up a strong password for our wireless network. You know, when somebody comes to your home and asks, what is your Wi-Fi and password? That's what I'm talking about. So as you can see here, right now, the SSID broadcast is enabled. That is that my wireless is searchable. Whoever has a network card in their device, they will be able to pick up the signals from my router. So if you have both standards of network in your router, you have to set up the Wi-Fi name and password separately. So I'm going to start with my 2.4 gigahertz. My SSID or Wi-Fi name is by default Netgear 94. Be creative. Name your network whatever you want so it becomes searchable, it's identifiable. You don't want 10 people in a neighborhood using the Netgear having the same username. It's going to become hard for you to identify the network. So be creative here. And then for my 5 gigahertz network, as you can see, it says 5G. It's always good to identify a network of what gigahertz or what frequency it's transmitting. Now to change the password, it's right here. It's also known as paraphrase. I would strongly recommend to change your Wi-Fi passwords and use the strong password conventions that are shared with you in chapter 1 of your textbook as well as chapter 10 of your textbook. That is, use a long password, use at least one capital letter, use at least one special character, and then make it as complicated as you can without forgetting about it. So other thing in the wireless setup is the security option. The security option is that when your information is transmitted between your system and reaches the router, it's all happening in the air. It's using radio signals to do that. That information once in the air is receivable. How about if you had an option to encrypt that? Security options let you do that. As you can see, there are about 5 options. None would mean that none of the information transmitted over my network is going to be encrypted. WEP, WPA passkey, WPA2 passkey with AES encryption, these are all encryption methods. Without going into their detail, my recommendation would be always select WPA2 with AES encryption. Encrypted information is always good, that even if somebody gets that information, it's hard for them to crack it. So always make sure that your security options are set to WPA2 with AES encryption right here. And again, if you have 2 wireless network options, 2.4 and 5 gigahertz, you have to set it up for each one of them right here. Bottom line, in the wireless setup, there are 2 things that we have to do. One, set a very strong paraphrase or password for a Wi-Fi network, and then set our security options to WPA2 with AES encryption for our wireless network. All right, so let's move on to our next set, and that is attached devices. So, when you're setting up a router, eventually in your private network, all the devices will be accessing internet using your router, and your router is kind of a control center. You can keep track of what devices are attached to your router, either wirelessly or through a LAN or wired network. Right now, once I went into attached devices, I can see through my 5G wireless device, my laptop is communicating with my router wirelessly. Only one is attached. Let's look at the information. The first SSID is the name of my network. And then IP address that you're seeing right here is what my router assigned my laptop to in order to communicate to itself over the private network. Now, an IP address or internet protocol you will learn about in the videos this week is basically your unique ID on your private network that your router has developed. Every device that is communicating over either a private network or a public network requires a unique IP address or internet protocol. It's like you're living in an apartment, or if you have a house, it has a unique address. So the mail can reach you, or if you order Amazon packages, they can reach you. If your address is exactly the same as, let's say, somebody living 2 streets down, then there's a very likely chance those packets are going to get lost. And that's exactly the concept of IP address. Now, every device that comes with a network card or capability of being connected to the internet have a default MAC address. MAC address, also known as a physical address of the identification of the network card that your device is using to communicate over the internet. And this is the device name. This is the name of my laptop. If your laptop has your name or some fancy name, it's going to appear right here. Now, sometimes you want to check if an unauthorized device is communicating with your router. Okay, to do that, or to check whether there is an unauthorized, or if there is a device that you don't recognize is using your router or connected to your router, we can always go into the access control. So once you get into the access control, also known as MAC filtering in some of routers, allows you to actually restrict the access of devices to the router. What does access control or MAC filtering do? It allows us to restrict the access of any wireless device using their physical address or MAC address. Yeah. So moving on to the next, I'm going to go into the advanced settings. And inside advanced settings, I'm going to go into my setup. And actually in advanced setting, if I go back into the wireless setup, you're going to come to the same wireless setup that we have just looked at in just a moment ago. But I'm going to go into the LAN setup, and I want to share some information about a local area network that your router has set up for itself. Now, within the LAN setup interface, the first piece of information that you're looking at right here is LAN TCP/IP setup, and the first IP address, which is 192.168.1.1. This is the IP address of your router. If you do an IP config, which through the videos that you would have done it on your computers, it's also referred to as default gateway, and that's how you recognize your router through the command prompt. But if you want to pull that information up through your router, it is right here under LAN setup. The IP address of the router on your private network is 192.168.1.1. Okay. Now the next thing is the DHCP server. DHCP stands for Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol. The set of videos that you're watching this week also cover this topic. Now, simply put, Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol server is running inside your router that is managing all the IP addresses it has allocated to the devices connected to it in the private network, along with their MAC addresses, because there's some place this router has to keep track of how many devices are attached to it, what are their MAC addresses, and what IP addresses it has issued to that particular device. Now, sometimes, usually, as the name suggests, Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol, right now if I click add in my address reservation, right now my laptop is assigned 192.168.1.3 IP address. If I disconnect this laptop and connect another device, then this router is going to go ahead and assign that IP address to that particular device. If you're managing your own private network and you want to have an IP address assigned to a particular device and you don't want the router to assign that IP address to some other device, you can go into the address reservation, which I just did, and you can just enable that address in the address reservation table. You can dedicate an IP address in your private network. So bottom line, what does address reservation do? Address reservation reserves an IP address in a private network for the device that you are selecting. Okay? I'm not going to reserve it, so I'm going to cancel that. Let's go into security. You can access control within this particular router through security as well, and we have talked about access control already. Quick revision, what is access control? Access control, also known as MAC filtering, allows you to restrict the access of devices on your private network by their physical addresses or MAC addresses. Moving on to the last bit of setup, which is the administration setup. Now the administration setup is where we need to do two things to secure a router. One thing is setting up a password for a router. At the beginning of this topic, I told you that to access this dashboard, to access the administrative interface of this router, I used the default username and password that came with this router. Now, if you go on to Google right now and type in default router passwords, you're gonna get or receive the full list of all the default username and passwords of all the routers that are built so far. So if you don't change your administrative username and password for your router, basically anybody can get into it, and if they are not good people, they're going to change your Wi-Fi username and password and you're going to be locked out of it, among other things. So when you get a router, when you're setting it up, first thing you do along with changing your Wi-Fi username and password is change the password for your router access as well, and you do it under administration. Use the strong password conventions. Again, longer password, use a capital letter along with small letters, use numbers and special characters if they're allowed. Okay. The last thing to strengthen your home network is router update. Always keep your router up to date. Some routers call it firmware update, some routers call it router update. In order to update a router, you actually have to get into this particular router setup and check for any updates. Right now I'm not connected to the internet, but if I click check, if there is a router update, it's gonna update itself. So a quick review, what we have done, we have seen some features inside a standard home router that's gonna help you set up your router in an effective way. There are 5 security features that we talked about, and let's review it real quick. First and the foremost thing when you get a new router is change the Wi-Fi username and password, and second thing you need to do is change the password for the admin control by going into the administration menu. The second thing you need to do is set up your wireless security encryption, and always keep it to WPA2 with AES encryption. The third thing we talked about is access control. If you want to limit the devices that could actually connect to your router, you can use access control, and you can limit their access by entering their specific MAC addresses, and your router will only allow those devices to connect to itself, and any other device that it doesn't recognize whose MAC address is not in that list, it's not going to let it connect to it. And finally, always make sure that your router is up to date. It's a good idea to log in once a month and make sure if there are any new updates available for your router. The stronger your router is, the more secure you're going to be over the internet. Hopefully this tutorial gave you some practical information on how to secure your router.